you look right down there, you'll see where them are straight out in front of each other. And that's when a pile gets big enough, then it starts pushing itself. One sticks out straight, the next one there's 3 or 4 laying out straight, and then it starts moving itself. So you can see right down here, it didn't move a lot, but it moved about 4 inches. And it might move a foot, it might move 2 more inches, and it might quit. It just depends on how it all works out. It probably took a lot longer because the ground is soft, it's really wet, it rained 2 or 3 inches here, and that's probably a lot of it. But usually the pile doesn't have to get quite that big before it starts moving itself. But when it starts moving itself, you really got to pay attention. And that's why I always jump up there and stand on top of that beam and keep an eye on it. So I just split another one, and I'm going to show you here how that's working now. You see where that's bridged across there like that, and you see where it pulled the whole chassis out. So that time it moved. That was just one more piece. That time it moved about 2 feet. So you can see where now I'm going to have to, probably after about another 10 pieces, I'm going to have to move my power unit. But I was going to show you now that it's moved. I was going to reach up here and I was going to show you this hitch that I've got on the front of this, that you pick it up with a skid loader and move it around. Get this out of the way here. So there's the hitch, and that can is the can that hides that cylinder. That's the piano hinge. There's one of them on each side that hold that cover on there. If you wanted to, you can pull that pin out of there, and you can pull that cover off and access that cylinder. But that's the hitch, and that's the front of the splitter. And you can see how it's bridged itself, and it keeps pushing and pushing and pushing until it pushes itself away from the pile. Now, what's going to happen is the next piece or two, it's probably just going to, them things are not going to stay in alignment. One of them's going to fall, and then it's just going to start stacking up a big pile again. So let's walk around here to the other side and see if there's more than one piece that's stuck on there that's pushing that stuff out. We take these pieces with the knots where they get real gnarly and they got knots in them, and then we'll get that little splitter up here, the one that's on a trailer, and we'll split all that stuff up into we don't waste anything. We get everything out of that pig but the squeal. But if you look there, you'll see how it's bridged itself out and pushed itself away from that pile. So the pile had to get pretty big this time because the ground is soft. If the ground wasn't soft, that pile wouldn't be quite that big. But it's nice, it puts it in a windrow for you. And when it keeps it in a windrow like that, it makes it pretty nice to clean up. You can take a skid loader and clean that up. Take it over there, and you can put it into our old corn dump that we modified, and we elevate that stuff up and stack it up even taller. So helps keep it out of your way, so you got more room to do other things. I'm going to explain to you our big log splitter, how it works, how we made it, why we made it, and some particulars about it. It uses a method of 2 cylinders, so when this lays down on the ground, on the other side's one just like it but half as long. It lays down too. When you load a log on it, they're both teed together with the same hydraulic circuit. So when you go to raise the log up, the other one folds up like this, and then this one will fold up and keep the log from rolling off the side of our log splitter, so you don't have to go chasing your wood all around the place. We also, on the top, we have a grabber that once you split the log, if there's a big chunk that's left, it reaches around, it grabs the log, it holds it, when you back the cylinder up, it carries it back. You drop it, it falls down, you split it again, and you keep doing that until it's done. Tied to that arm grabber is a cylinder in the bottom that raises the blade up and down. The blade will go up and down about 4 inches. Depending on how thick you want that last cut to be. If you want it to be 4 inches or you want it to be 6 inches, whatever you want it to be, whatever you start with, once you get a piece wedged in underneath of the blade like I have now, that's pretty much where it stays at. Up in the very front, the cylinder that raises that blade up and down is encased in a half piece of pipe with 2 big piano hinges, 1 inch in diameter. They go down and hold that in place. On the front of that is a 2-inch receiver with a 2 5/16 inch ball receiver that hangs out there. So when you want to move it, we got a hitch that goes on our skid loader. You reach around the front of that, you grab a hold of that, and you can roll it. It rolls on this big round wheel here on the back, this big old piece of 6-inch pipe. It's got a bearing on each side. So as the wood pile gets big, about where it's at right now, so it's probably about 12 feet wide, about 5.5 feet tall, and about 12 or 13 feet long. When you get to this amount of wood it's sitting in front of it, what it will do is it will self-propel itself away from the pile. So you'll get 4 or 5 long straight pieces that all start coming through the splitter at the same time, every time, and it'll start making like 2 little sticks sticking together, and it'll start to propel itself. As it propels itself, once it might move 2 inches, it might move a foot. It just depends on how the wood falls. But usually it'll keep stacking it right back up again until it makes another big pile, and it builds a couple of sticks together, and it'll push itself again. So after it pushes itself for 3 or 4 feet, then we got to come in with a forklift on the back of the Bobcat. We get a forklift and we hook onto our engine and our hydraulic system, and we pick it up and we move it back another 3 or 4 feet. So we've always got the windrow getting longer, the engine getting moved back, the splitter keeps splitting, and the first thing you know, you got a lot of wood sitting right out in front of you. So with that being said, I'm going to show you some of the particulars of this animal and how it works. So I'm going to grab the camera and I'm going to try not to be real jiggly with it, and I'm going to walk you around and I'm going to show you some certain parts, and I'll point them out as we go. So the first thing we have is we have a box blade. We're running a 2-stage box blade with a top and a bottom, and we have knives in between. Down here on the front, you'll see this is the piano hinge down here, and that's the cover that goes around the cylinder that picks it up and down. This backbone, what I call a backbone, is made to the main double frame chassis. It's a solid piece of inch plate. It's 16 inches long, it's 16 inches tall, but it goes all the way down through, all the way down to the bottom, and is part of the main structure of what this blade pushes up against when this thing is running. So that backbone, it's never going to go anywhere. No matter what you push against it, you're never going to hurt that at all. This is our arm that reaches out and grabs our log, squeezes our log up against our head, holds it through that piece of square box tubing over there is where it slides. I'll show you that cylinder in a minute. This is the back of the cylinder where it pushes up against it. It's all sitting on a chassis that's all made out of 8-inch by 6-inch tubing, not tubing, but I-beam. Down there on the bottom, down underneath there, if you can see that, that's the mechanism that hooks to the blade and raises the blade up and down. The cylinder's in the front, it's got a pivot point, and then that great big piece of inch plate, 20 inches long, that's our blade. That's the bottom of the blade. So that raises our blade up and down. We ran our hydraulic hoses through 3-inch pipe so that when the wood starts stacking up down in here and everywhere else, that it doesn't get out of a means of tearing up our hydraulic hoses. Nobody wants to get your hydraulic hoses tore up. We run a closed center spool valve. It's load sense. This is the one that squeezes the log and raises the blade up and down. This one here is the log loader. This one is the one that pushes the log forward. This is our load sense that goes back to our piston pump, our swash plate piston pump. If you look down here, you're going to see that we built this thing out of 4 pieces of metal, a main beam on the bottom, a main beam on the top, 2 main beams in the middle, and that's where our blade goes through. It goes through that center piece, and on each side of that, where the blade goes through, there's a big 1-inch sleeve on each side that blade slides up and down through. Then down here on the bottom, we have a roller wheel. It propels, once it gets to moving, it propels itself. We got a block bearing on each side that supports that it rolls on. There's our main squeezing cylinder right there. This cylinder right here is the one that grabs a hold of the arm and pulls the arm back by stretching it out. This cylinder here is the one that raises up the catcher for the other side. It catches the log. And then up on top we got a sliding block so that this thing can never fall down, because it does pivot back here. So we got this sliding block on here so it'll actually slide across the blade and keep this thing from falling down inside of there. If you will watch here, if I lean on this real hard, you'll see it go up. If you want to load it on a trailer, you stretch this cylinder out 1.5 feet and you pick it up with that shackle right there, and you can pick it right straight up. It does not teeter-totter at all. It'll stay right there. We got grease fittings in these blocks on each side. We got 5 3/4-inch grade 8 bolts on each side that we learned. We started out with 5 1/2-inch bolts, and 1/2-inch bolts didn't do it. That thing exploded and blew them bolts straight up in the air about 35 feet. So we upsized it to 5/8. Since then we haven't had any trouble. We use quick couples on our hydraulic hoses so that you can uncouple this rig and throw the hoses on top of the power unit and carry the power unit separate from the log splitter. So if you want to move it someplace, you can pick that up, move it with a set of forks, and then come back and you can get on the hitch and move the splitter itself. So we use a C201 reefer engine out of a Thermo King unit, an SB2000 or an SB1 refrigeration unit. We use a swash plate piston pump with load sense. You'll see the compensator sitting right on top of the pump right there. That sets your pressure and your standby pressure and your high pressure. We're running this rig at 3,200 psi. We got her pretty much maxed out, but it usually wants all of it if you've got something in there that's got a knot in it. We got a pretty good sized hydraulic tank. We got return filter. We're filtering all our oil going back to tank. We run an electric fan. And probably one of the neater things I put on it is I put on a hydraulic throttle. So anytime that you touch one of those spool valves, that load sense pressure goes up and it goes to this little cylinder in here, and it runs that engine RPM up all the way to the top. So you'll notice if I stand around here and I don't touch a lever, that engine will idle. If I grab a hold of a function and try to do something with it, then that engine will throttle all the way up to wide open throttle. We put quick couples on the hoses so we can disconnect them and move them. Makes it simple, but the thing is when they drag across the ground, they try to uncouple themselves, and then that's not a good situation when they do that and you're trying to get something done. So I always take a little bit of tape and tape them so as they're sliding across the ground that they don't uncouple themselves. I'm going to show you the size of the wood pile here as to about what it takes before it starts to move. So if you look here and you see how big this pile of wood is, and you see the splitter sitting here, you understand that it takes a pretty good pile of wood before it starts to move. Once it starts to move, then it'll just continue on down and it'll just keep going until you decide to stop it. Or if you want your windrow to turn a little bit, you grab a hold of the back of that thing with a skid loader and give it a little push and push it sideways, and you can make a crooked pile if you want, but we don't usually do that. We just keep on going straight. But you can see that the pile of wood that's sitting here, what it takes to get the thing to move. That's a pretty good pile of wood to get it to move. It holds 15 gallons of diesel fuel. The first engine we had on there was a 4-cylinder gas Wisconsin. And that thing was drinking 5 gallons of gasoline every 2 hours. I thought, I can't afford this, so I put this little diesel in here, and now I'm running a half a day on 5 gallons. So a whole lot more efficient than what it was. And I've got more torque, and I've got more power, and all around just a lot better situation than what I had before. I'm going to walk up here and I'm going to lay this ramp down so you can see where this ramp goes to. So it goes all the way down on the ground, and there's a, if you had a log or something, I got a little tapered shoe on the front. So if you want to roll it on there, you can roll it on there. But the other side, like I said, the other side does the exact same thing. When it goes down, it goes down. When that one comes up, this one comes up. But this one will come up first because there's no load on it. So this thing will really make a lot of wood in a hurry if you can feed it. The worst part of it is we take these big pieces like this over here, and we'll cut them up, and then we'll take that one splitter that I have that takes the big chunks, and we'll make these chunks here, so if the thing was to ever roll over on you or something, it ain't gonna kill you. These, you can just walk through these. They're easier to get on the ramp. You don't have to have a skid loader following you around all the time trying to, make sure that you get it on there straight. So we found that this works a lot better. Once you get a hole dug in there, you can always take a skid loader and push the pile closer to you, and that way you can just keep on splitting. Ain't a problem with just keep on splitting. I don't know if any of you know the difference between an open center and a closed center spool valve, but a closed center spool valve runs load sense pressure. They're not the same. You cannot, if you've got a closed center spool valve, you have to use a pump that's got load sense on it. A swash plate pump that actually is freewheeling until you call for oil. So there's a lot of difference between open center and closed center hydraulic systems. Good thing to know if you're wanting to deal with hydraulics is the difference between open center and closed center. So very important. Don't just try to use a closed center pump and not have all your components that are matching. Otherwise you're going to have a major catastrophe. So other than that, I don't think I showed you a picture of the blade here and what the blade looks like. It's a box blade, and it's been through the mill. The first blade we had on it, it made 8 pieces at a time, but the pieces were so big that we had to put them on a little splitter and split them 3 and 4 more times. Well, that wasn't what I was wanting. I was wanting a pile of wood that I can go out there and get a piece of wood out of, and I don't have to split 3 and 4 more times. So everything that you see in here came through this splitter, and the biggest piece that you'll be able to find is probably going to be about 8 inches by 6 inches. That's the biggest. Every now and then you get a great big one where you'll have a piece fall off the side, and we try to grab a hold of them and run them back through one more time so we don't have any big pieces in the pile. But anyhow, this tin cover is just to keep the split wood away from you. The beams down here are just sitting on the ground. There's nothing there. It's just, as it propels itself, it's just rolling on the wheel on the other side and dragging these 2 beams on the ground. Not much to it. Works really well. You don't have to deal with keeping the wood moved away from it. Originally you had to keep the wood moved away from it. Now you don't have to. You can have other people doing other things rather than trying to keep up with this. So I hope you liked this video on my animal here. And it took me a long time to make this thing, but I'm pretty proud of it and I like it. And it gives me something to do. So give me that like button and we'll make another video for you on something else we build. Thanks for watching.